All right, we should be live everywhere. I hope we are. Welcome to the CNC with Dave Gatton show. I've got my usual sidekick, Fabian Sueta, live from the homestead. We've got Jim Sinicola, live from Michigan, I guess, right? You're in Michigan?
Yep.
And joining us for the first time tonight, we've got Mr. Landis Stutes, and I believe you're in West Virginia. Is that?
Virginia.
Virginia. Okay, I was close. I remember I met you the first time at the Hickory Show.
That's right.
About a couple of years ago. So it's good to see you again, Landis. And once again, I don't see a thing going over here on YouTube. So let me see what's going on with that.
I have a CNC with Gatton link here. Yep, it's the link.
Okay, this is the one that's streaming. So yeah, put another link on there again. Let me go back to the old one.
You have the. I mean, I see you guys live, and I see the chat. Do you see it, Dave? On YouTube?
There. Okay. Yeah. Somehow. Now, see, when I did that the other night when I was on there with Jim, and we just kind of did that little tech support live, everything worked perfect. It went everywhere. But somehow when I schedule it, it somehow moves it to a different spot, and I don't understand why. So I'll have to go back. But anyway, we're live on YouTube. If everybody catches that link and comes back over here. Yeah, Rob, I see Rob's there. So, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, there's 21. It's growing.
Live on the Facebook as well.
Yep.
I don't know if that's, yep, we're live on Facebook and also should be on, yep, we're on Twitch. And we should all be also be on Periscope, which I don't even know. I still have my account over there. So, and I know I had a few folks that follow me over there, but it's been years. But I figure, what the heck, I'll broadcast over there too, and maybe somebody will stumble across it. So anyway, folks, we're back live. Going to be talking about some of the things that may be a little bit intimidating for some of the brand new guys, especially if you were like me and you know, electronics isn't your thing. So we're going to kind of talk about that and kind of show you some of the things to look for and what to watch out for in some cases and stuff like that. But anyway, also want to remind everybody about the current challenge that's going on. I've got the ridiculous stepper motor knob challenge going on. And if you watched my video that I put out the other day, you saw my attempt to inspire folks to get out and make something pretty ridiculous. Anyhow, let's see, we've got some comments coming through here. You know, there's Gary Brady, Javi, David Crook, Troy, how you doing, Troy? Steve Adkins, Gary Brady, and you'll see most of these comments are going to be from, well, it looks like he's watching on both of them.
I can give you a roll call for YouTube if you like.
Well, okay, yeah, go ahead and do that because most everybody's probably watching over there. We got about 30-something folks watching over there.
So good evening, David Crook, Dennis Nolan, Harry's Place, Kevin Harder, Larry Duggar, Matt Willie or Wiley, I'm not sure, Mike Haichu, Rob Hampton, of course, Rob Schuster, The Wood Bucket, Troy Howell, Troy Pritchard, and of course Steve Atkins. Are those the ones I just currently see? I know there are more.
Did I not bring you in, Jim, or did you just leave?
No, it just kind of clicked off on me. I don't know what happened.
Okay, okay. Well, I just happened to glance down and see that you were still in the studio part there. So sorry about that. We'll get you in here. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try to. Jason Ross is in the house. How you doing, Jason? I'm gonna have to try to figure out why when I just do it without scheduling it on YouTube, it seems to work fine. So, but yeah, maybe I just will quit doing that, and that way it'll work right, and everybody will get notified if they're subscribed, which you probably should be anyway. And if you have the bell clicked, you'll get a notification. And of course, like I said, we're live here on Facebook as well. So anyway, yeah, so we've got the challenge going. I've got 2 or 3 videos so far, but the challenge is going to run through October 4th, and then I'll be announcing the winner or possibly winners on the Saturday show, October 5th. So just on the show in the chat, how many folks are working on a video for that challenge, or is it just too ridiculous?
It's not too ridiculous. I wish I had more time because of my scheduling, I'm going to be stuck out here most of September. But I'm still going to try to make it a few. You know how it is. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, as they say. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to do 10 different gadgets, and I yet to do the first. Frustrating to no end.
Yeah.
I want my shop.
Okay. I wanted to ask Landis. I meant to ask him before we even went live, and I didn't get a chance because we got busy doing other stuff. But you have both a Gatton CNC and a Garage Work. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yes.
Okay. Now, since we're talking about CNC electronics tonight, what kind of electronics are you running on each of those machines?
Well, the Gatton's got the original Zyotech box that the single port, and it's been working great for me. I haven't had any issues with the heat that they have. Some people are having, but it runs great. But my new one, the Garage Works, now I went ahead and bought actually the one I think you're going to cover tonight, and put it together with the drivers. And I've only done a couple projects with it so far, but it's running a laser, so I love that thing too.
Mm-hmm. And which laser did you end up getting? You got the JTech?
I got the JTech.
Okay.
Yeah, because I run mine 8-9 hours a day sometimes, and it holds up great.
Yeah. I've, of course, I have one of the Ox lasers, and I have the JTech, and that's what I love about the JTech. I mean, it's a bigger upfront cost, but you don't have to worry about letting it rest. You can just run and run and run with it, and it just, at least so far, mine's done great. So,
I did put that pick deck board on mine, and so I can regulate, because I have done some photographs, but so I can regulate my output, anywhere from 0 to about 4.5 volts.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, we may have to have you back on the show another time to talk about that board, because I haven't got one of those yet. I had it in my cart on Amazon not Amazon, but the whatever that website is, the JTech site, I guess.
JTech.
And I just never have bought it yet. So, and one reason because I've really been too busy with other things to to play around with it. But in fact, I haven't even played around with my JTech much here lately at all. But oh, this is good. Mike Haichu says he's working on his second entry, and his first one was hilarious. So I can't wait to see what he's coming up with on his second one here. Let's see. Jason says I'm running a Gecko Drive G540 about 10 years now. NEMA 23 480 ounce. His own custom interface PCB from the G4, all limits, e-stop, etc. Yep. See, Jason's one of those electronic guys, so that's right up his alley. It's he wouldn't have any issue trying to get his own thing. But the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about tonight is for the guys who are more like me that don't know much about electronics and stuff like that. But anyway, it looks like from these comments, it looks like most of them are coming from over here from YouTube. Anyway, I wanted to kind of talk about when you start building a DIY kit, whether it's a Gatton CNC, a GarageWorks CNC, or maybe you're just building your own design or something like that. If you're not familiar with the electronic end of it, you got to figure out, okay, what makes these things go. And I have to tell you that there's so much information out there. It used to be there wasn't any, and now there's information overload where if you try to go look for things, you just get overwhelmed. For example, go to Google and type in 4-axis CNC kit and see all the stuff that pops up. Or even better than that, go to Google and type in 4-axis CNC router wiring diagram. And oh my God, you get, all kinds of.
From a very simplistic one to full out blueprints.
Yeah, and you can search and search and search, even if you've picked out your components, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And even if you've picked out your components and you try to find a diagram that's got exactly the same thing you've got, you'll find where, the stepper motor is the same, the drivers are the same, but the breakout board's different, or, it's got one power supply and you've got two, or, something like that. So it's really hard to find a drawing that makes sense that, has everything just like what you want. But for those who may not know exactly what it takes to make one of these things run, I'm going to do a quick screen share here, fellas, so we'll all scoot over to the side. But this is one of the kits that I highly recommend, and I keep a link to this one on the Gatton CNC or the DaveGatton.com webpage. And this is the Stepper Online 4-axis kit. You can see it comes with 2 power supplies. It also comes with the 4 stepper motors that you need, and those are NEMA 23 425 ounce, so those will work just fine with either a Gatton CNC or a GarageWorks CNC. And then it also has the
4 stepper drivers.
Yeah, the 4 drivers, and they are the DM542T, I believe is what they are.
Does it come with a controller?
Well, no, I mean, that kind of is the controller once you get it on.
Well, you need the only thing missing from there is the motion controller. I mean, you could technically go direct from your parallel port to each driver, but that's...
Yeah, and again, this is, we're going to get into those in a little bit too, but this is kind of what you need to start wiring things up. Now, depending on whether you were going to try to use a parallel port, if you're running Mach 3 or something like that, then you would still need, a breakout board. I've got a couple of examples. this is the one that I had on that that kind of mock-up that I did a few shows a while back. And Landis pointed out today that although it may not say so in the documentation, but you need to power it to get it to do all those outputs and stuff. So,
yeah, you need the power to get your inputs to actually turn on. The input circuit won't energize. It's a little LED on the left right under the beside the inputs, and they'll turn on. They still work off of 5 volts, but you still have to have that 12 to 24 volts to actually turn the circuit on.
right now, but I found when I'm using my UC 100, because it's a USB, that I have run, because that's the way I had that one. I didn't have a power supply connected to give that any voltage. And I'm assuming when I was doing those demonstrations with the limit switch and all that it was just getting the 5 volts from that USB. I don't know if that's the case. Because are you talking about if you're running it without a USB?
Yeah, I run mine with an external 5 volt supply too. But looking at that board, it's what's bad is there's several different Bobs out there that look exactly alike, and you have to watch if someone tells you how to wire it because it'll be wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I know the one that comes with that kit actually has a USB port on it, and I don't see it on that one, but that's the one that really has to have the 12 volts. So you have to be. You really got to check your documentation for your Bob to make it work right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, like I said, this is the exact number that of the Bob that I used for that mock-up. And again, anybody that's watching, if you want to go back and watch those videos, I have links to them in the description of the video if you're watching here on YouTube. But on all 3 of my machines, I run something that's much simpler. I run this breakout board right here. And this allows me to, you can't get much simpler than this.
That is a pure, straight, and simple breakout board.
Yeah,
To put it simply, the difference between this one and most of the others is that this one is basically tapping into each of the parallel port cables directly, whereas the others have circuitry to sense whether there's power going in and out, protection from overloads, and different circuitry to put power on or make sure there's power on it already for input or output. So like I said, this is a pure and simple. It's like taking the wires and soldering them to each of the 25 pins, whereas the others is more of an intelligent type of, to put it simple.
Yeah, and of course, along with that, the price of that first one was, I don't remember, I think it's like $25-30, something like that maybe. And I think this one was, I think I wrote it down, I think this one was like $17 on Amazon that I found today. So and if anybody wants to check these out, there's also links again in the YouTube show description. You won't find them on Facebook or anything if you're watching over there, but
the only danger of this one versus the other one is the other one, like I said, usually has a certain amount of circuitry and protection so you don't burn out your parallel port on your computer. Whereas this one, if you wire something incorrectly or there's some sort of surge from your whatever you have it connected to, you're directly putting that power or those shorts or onto the computer's parallel port. and
Yeah.
could theoretically burn out the port, if not the entire motherboard.
Yeah. Well, in my case, you know, like I said, I have 3 of these on all 3 of the machines that I currently use.
Right.
And the reason I use this particular breakout board is because I need a parallel cable running from my Xylotex box to one of these connections, and then I need another place to plug in my UC100. So, see, I'm not even using a parallel port. I'm using a UC100 with all 3 of my machines.
Right.
This makes a very simple method of doing that. And plus, you still have the different pins there, you know, to wire everything for the homing switches or e-stop or touch plate or whatever you might be doing there. So, you know, again, if you're starting out, this is a super simple thing, and it's pretty dirt cheap too. About $17 is what it was on Amazon today. So, let's see. I think I had a picture. This is basically the same one, and you can't see it from this shot. But the only difference is it was a few bucks more, and it had like a little plastic thing underneath it that was for a den rail if you were going to mount it on a den rail. This other one that I have just has the 4 holes. And in fact, I've even taken the top off of my Xylotex box on one of the machines, and drilled these 4 holes and just have this kind of setting on top of my Xylotex box with some screws, using them as standoffs, and that way I can get to all the wiring and stuff. But yeah, this one here is a few bucks more, and of course this one is, like I said, a little more complicated, but it's still not super hard. I mean, you know, you can find diagrams. Like I didn't have any trouble finding this little picture here. And of course, they've got P15 there, and then it says P1, not P15, because P15 is down here. But other than that, you know, you can find some pretty good drawings for that. And other than the thing that Landis mentioned is, you know, if you get stuff that's not working, it might be because you have to power this up with an external supply. And of course, you know, for 5 volts, you can find 5 volts probably on an old phone charger you have or something. Just as long as you know which one's the positive and which one's the negative. It's not hard to
put the electronics as simply as I could. I would say that for those of you who are new to CNC, you have on one end you have Mach 3, which is the software that's basically telling the motors what to do. And at the end of this mishmash of electronics, you have your 4 motors, which are moving your router around. So in between, there are multiple designs of different. There's multiple ways of doing it, whether it's one all-in-one unit, or whether it's a Xylotex that isn't an all-in-one unit, or you do it separately, or you design your own programmable Raspberry Pi for a controller, or you don't use a controller. Again, multiple ways of going from Mach 3 to the end result of moving those motors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what the show's all about, is that stuff in between.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not really, like I said, it's really, you know, my old saying is to all of this stuff is it's not rocket science. And even though I'm not an electronic guy, you know, when I started doing the CNC stuff, I loved it because I ran across the Xylotex kit that offered a plug and play. And that is just, I mean, you can't get any easier than that. You know, it was all color coded. You know, the red is the X-axis, the green is the Z-axis, the yellow is the Y-axis, the blue is the A-axis. I mean, it just doesn't get any simpler. But, they're kind of no longer around anymore. And there for a while, he was selling just drivers wired up with a breakout board, and you had to get your own steppers. But I checked yesterday, I think it was, and he's not even doing that anymore. So, so there might be a few plug and play kits, but you have to remember, especially, I know most of these guys, when they're starting out, they're on a budget. When you buy a plug and play kit, you're paying for that guy to do all the wiring that you could do. And most of them, I mean, you might find one where they even have limit switches and stuff pre-wired, but most of the time you're going to have to do that yourself anyway, because they don't know what kind of machine you're putting it on. They don't know what length of cable you need, that kind of stuff. So
if I were to guess, I would say that Jeff is not doing this anymore. There's a 99% chance I'm right, because there is really not much profit in putting them together. There really isn't. I mean, you're talking maybe you're making $50 or $100, and to put it all together, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot. I mean, it's simple. It's not. Don't get me wrong. It's not difficult, but it's a lot of wires to connect. It's a lot of wires to strip. It's a lot of connections that you have to make sure you have right. But it is simple.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of thrown around the idea of trying to put together a plug and play kit for folks, just because, I know how it is when you don't know how to do this stuff. But like you said, it's very time consuming, and you can't. I know I'd be so slow at it, I wouldn't be able to make any money doing it.
And I've thought about it myself, and I started doing the calculations, and I'd end up making $3 an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, unless I charge $100 or $200 more than what everybody else is charging, and then, and then you have the extra. I'm sure you're aware. Then you have the extra liability that if you put it together, and something goes wrong, now you got to cover the warranty on it, and there's no margin for that.
Yeah. I think what I'm going to try to do. Of course, I've been saying this for a long time, and I'm bad about, wanting to do something and have good intentions, but I just never get. What do you used to call it? Around to it? Is that what you said?
Around to it.
I need to get around to it. But what I need to do is do a nice drawing, with colored wires and the whole 9 yards, and try to get a decent thing, because like I said, and maybe come up with one for like the basic setup with that real simple breakout board that I mentioned, that makes it easy to use a UC 100 or well, I looked the other day on, I want to give a shout out to Troy Howell. I see he sent a super chat over there, I think. So
that he did.
I have my Gatton. I don't see it's not showing up over here yet. Maybe the super chat comments don't show up. Anyway, it says, I have my Gatton fully operational now. Thanks for all the real-time tech support, Dave. Now the learning curve has shifted to learning how to use the software.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Troy. I appreciate the super chat. That'll keep us that'll keep us going for another month on the StreamYard thing. So I appreciate that.
Todd's using an Acorn controller. And that's a pretty nice little controller to use too.
Yeah, there's a few people out there. Somebody had mentioned that to me before, and I looked at it. But if I'm not mistaken, and Todd, if I am, you correct me. But I believe that is proprietary software, is it not? And if so, that's kind of the thing I didn't like about it. He says this is what I used, much better than Mod. One thing I do want to mention, because I saw in the, I get a lot of the material for the shows here by reading the Facebook post and seeing what people put in there. Yeah, he says, yes, that's what I was thinking. It's a proprietary software. But one of the things I saw somebody post the other day, and I wanted to kind of talk about it briefly tonight, is, somebody had asked about the old Mach 3 versus Mach 4 thing. And they said, well, I'm thinking about getting Mach 4 because Mach 3 is no longer supported. Well, I just want to give you my 2 cents worth on the no longer supported thing. I've been using Mach 3 for longer than I can remember, and I've used their support 0 times. I mean, for hobby CNC, now if I was running a business and had, a big plant full of CNC equipment and stuff like that, yeah, maybe I would need them. But I've never had to go to ArtSoft or what is it? The Newfangled Solutions, I think is the web page. I've never had to go to them for anything to ask questions. And the people who do have to ask questions are probably going to just post it somewhere and get an answer from one of the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that use it. So to say that it's no longer supported, it's no longer supported by the company that makes it, because they would rather you buy the new Mach 4 where you can only put it on one computer versus, the freedom you had with Mach 3.
It's funny you say
support is like, that.
When you said it's not supported, I was cracking up because I was thinking to myself, neither's the Windows XP that's running on my machine along with Mach 3 that I've been using for the CNC, but it works perfectly fine and has for years.
Yeah, see here Jason's he's exactly on the same page as I am, because I have been using it. He says, I've been using Mach 3 for 10 plus years, never used support. It's rock solid, and I don't see any reason upgrading to 4. I wholeheartedly agree. There's if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. Now another thing that I will mention is that's why I always tell people to get a computer. If you're going to use Mach 3, get a computer that you're going to dedicate to your machine, and keep the dadgum thing off the internet, because that's the only thing that could possibly mess up your Mach 3. And I'll give you an example. Windows 10 did an update. It's been a while now. Well, it screwed up Mach 3. So everybody that had their stuff online and was running Windows 10 and got that update had to go back to ArtSoft and download another one, because they had to go in and fix a patch or something. I don't know all that software stuff, but anyway, you downloaded that version, and then it fixed it, and it would then work in Windows 10. And so I had to do that, but only here, because this computer, my office computer, is obviously connected to the internet. On all my machines, it's not, they're not connected to the internet. So I have never upgraded or had to do anything with Mach 3. Like Jason said, it's rock solid. And like I said, I just have to laugh like Javi did when people say, well, it's not supported. You don't need support. If you need to ask questions, there's a gazillion people out there using Mach 3, way more than there are using Mach 4. Now, I'm not knocking Mach 4. If you're new and you're starting out and you buy Mach 4, more power to you. That's great. But if you're like me, who bought Mach 3 years and years ago, and there's no reason to spend more money to get something different.
And it's not like, and for those of you again new to this, it's the difference between Mach 3 and Mach 4, it's not like we're talking about a Photoshop program that's giving you a bunch of fancy new tools and filters that it's best to stay updated. This is a program running a simple motion in 3 directions. There's nothing to it. The programming and the design is on a completely different program, like Aspire or Vectric. That's what you want to concentrate on. This is nothing more than a logical tool connected to the CNC. There's no reason to upgrade it whatsoever. It's not going to make the machine run any better, any faster. It's not going to make it more comfortable for you. No reason to update. It'll just add more problems to it.
Yeah, Todd H. CNC says the Pro license is $139, and they make a motion controller. Also, it's on a BeagleBone green boards. I don't know what that is, but he's talking about the Acorn there, I think.
The Acorn, yeah.
But like I said, I'm not going to knock that system because I'm sure it's a good system. I just don't like it personally because it was proprietary software that only works with their stuff. So whenever you buy into that, you better be in for the long haul, I guess. Sherry Brown says, I do not go for that. I Dropbox files to the CNC every day. Okay. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Yep.
Jason Rouse says, by the way, also running XP, and I do have it on my network for dumping toolpath to it, but heavily firewalled, no problems.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the same as Jason. I have mine is on my internal network. It doesn't have access to the outside. It's through a completely different networking card, and I transfer files to it all the time. I can even remotely access the outside files and then through it transfer files internally. But regardless, it's not touching the outside world.
Yeah.
And it's very
Yeah, Thomas Grimm here says even VCarve runs fine on an offline Windows 7 really old computer. Yep. Yeah, I upgraded. Not really upgraded. I got a newer computer for my shop out there, and the old one ran. It ran Mach 3 fine. Running the machine was no problem, but it was really slow when I did the simulation on VCarve just because the computer was slow. So that's really the only reason I swapped computers was to get one faster for the VCarve Pro, not so much for the Mach 3.
And for the work you're doing, depending on what type of work you do, I have 3 different versions of VCarve. I have 8.5, 9, and 9.5 loaded, because I'm lazy and I don't take the old ones off. Every now and then I click on one of the older ones. None of what I do on the CNC, because it's hobby stuff, it's signage, even the fancy 3D stuff, none of it will make a difference in which one of the versions I use. Other than if I use a newer version, I can't open it on an older version. But that being said,
Yeah. Now, Troy's got a good comment here, and this is why I always recommend to newbies to keep it simple and get what everybody else is doing, because you can get help if you're using what everybody else is using. But if you buy something that's brand new to the market and you're one of the first few to try it out, and then you have problems, guess what? It's harder to find people, and that's what I love about Mach 3. It's been around for years. It's does everything a hobbyist needs it to do. I know some people say, that I see people say they have problems with it. I've never had any problem with it. I guess maybe they're trying to do stuff way more complicated than me. I don't know. But anyhow,
I've done some pretty complicated stuff in excess of 500,000 lines, and I've never had an issue.
I'm going to create a banner here real quick. Speaking
of complicated stuff, I've got a question for the people out there. What's the longest CNC for those that have CNCs that they've ever run in terms of hours? Just curious. I've never done anything more than 51 hours, but I guess that's a pretty.
Jerry wanted my email address, where to send the link to the videos for the knob challenge. Apparently he's got one ready to send, I hope. But anyway, Jerry, you can send it to, oh, it went off. There it was. That email address right there, and that will be the one I use to add your link to the playlist. So I look forward to Rusty Nails. That's my old buddy Russ Meadows.
Yep.
Glad to see you out there in the chat, Russ. And these guys, so what would you ask how long they ran?
I asked how long, because my longest job was 51 hours. It was a fancy 3D surfboard, and I did it with a 16th-inch ball nose going over meticulously. It turned out beautiful. Didn't have to sand the thing, but whether it was worth it, I don't know. I was just curious to see what the longest run time, and a lot of them are in the, well, they're all over the place. 16, 12, 13, 6, 22, 41, 47.
Man, you guys run some long stuff.
Well,
I ran mine, I think, 12 hours, but I stopped because I wanted to go to bed. And I picked up the next day and ran, about 6 more hours. But that was 3D carving.
Yep, same here, 3D carving. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Run until you get to a stopping point, or even if you don't, stop it anyway, and just come back and run it the next day.
Yeah.
The 3D stuff is what always takes
an awful long time. Yeah, and I've always given the advice to people that actually always ask about making money with a CNC. I mean, from a businessman's perspective, although my business is not CNC, I've got other businesses. From a businessman and return of investment of your time perspective, do not do CNC projects is my recommendation. Simple V-carves, simple signs, straight out. Crank them out, and that's what's going to make you money. It's not glamorous, it's not great, it's not awe-inspiring, but you know what? But make up your mind whether you want to be artistic or whether you want to make money, because it's tough to do both at the same time.
Yeah. Troy's got a question here. He says, is the UC 100 or UC 400 the same as a smooth stepper, or would you need both? You won't need both. The UC 100 is a USB CNC motion controller, and the UC 300 and the UC 400 are a Ethernet CNC motion controller, which would be similar to the Smooth Stepper, which is a different brand, but you would not need both of them. You would need one or the other. I had at one time, in fact, I think I did a video on it. It's probably been over a year or two now, because I had a Smooth Stepper, and it worked. I mean, it worked fine, but the thing that I didn't like about it, and at the time I didn't have a dedicated computer. I was using my laptop, so every time I took my laptop out there, I had to reconfigure it to use that, and then I would run the machine, then I'd bring the laptop back in, and I'd have to reconfigure it to, be able to get email and stuff and all that. So it just seemed a little more difficult. And when I bought the UC 100, which is just the USB, that was just so simple, it's ridiculous. So I've got 3 or 4 of those things now. Well, I have one on each one of my machines, so I got 3 of them connected, and I've got another one sitting in on the counter from my buddy Jim. But let's see what other kind of questions we got over here. Let's see. Okay, so they do pretty much the same thing. Yeah, kind of, sort of. Like I said, in fact, I'm pretty sure that when you go to the CNCDrive.com website that has the UC 100, 300, 400, and all that, they used to have a UC 300 that was USB also. Well, now when I looked yesterday, they are discontinuing the UC 300 USB, and now it's a Ethernet, and the UC 400 is also an Ethernet. And the difference between those is, I should have had a picture ready, or had one. I didn't bring it back here. But the UC 100 is just a very simple, looks like a little gray plug. It's got the.
Here, if you want, hang on, let me screen share. I've got it pulled up.
Okay.
There we go, and stand by. And there we go.
Yeah, there you go. That's the shot I should have got. This is what I have right down. Well, I can't point to the UC 100. I keep thinking you can see my arrow, but you can't.
Sorry, the UC 100 is the bottom left, gray one.
Yeah, I have 3 of those, and you simply got a parallel port connection on one end, which I connect to my parallel cable, and then on the other end is where the USB cable goes.
Right.
So it's very simple, but you notice with the others, you have some other, I don't know what all you got on there. I guess you've got some other options where it'll do a little bit more things. So, yeah, if you hold it right there on that, come up just a little bit, Javi.
This way?
Yeah. See, I think that one, UC, no. I'm looking at the UC 300.
Yeah.
USB motion controller, and doesn't it say
obsolete?
Obsolete.
Obsolete. Yep.
Yeah, so they quit making that. Now go up just a little bit. No, the other way. The other up.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, there's the UC 400, and see, it uses an Ethernet cable, and now the UC 300 does the same thing. It uses the Ethernet cable. So those are all good options. I don't know what those run. I don't think they have prices underneath those right there.
Let's see.
I know the UC 100 you can get on Amazon for about $114 or something like that. And I do want to mention too, to all the new guys, when you go if you go look on eBay, you'll see some fake ones, and there's a lot of copycats out there. So if you're paying less than $100 for a UC 100, don't buy it, because you're getting one of the fake ones. There's been people buying from eBay or someplace, and they're like $50 or something, and then they get them and they don't work. So some things you just can't skimp on. No matter who you buy that from, whether you buy it off of Amazon or eBay, or you buy it directly from the CNC. The distributor here in the U.S. I think is CNC4PC.com, and then that website was CNCDrive.com.
Right.
So if you get it from there, it's going to be over $100 for that UC 100. So don't try. Let's see, Jerry Brown's just saying the UC 400 ETH is $150 on Amazon. Here's Jerry Coleman, says he runs the UC 100. That's what I use. Russ, here we go again, still in the box. That's kind of an inside joke, unless you know Russ Meadows, but
that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I run a straight parallel port to the Xylotech, to the controller built into the Xylotech. So it all.
And it says, I purchased a 4-axis stepper motor kit off Amazon on EMA 23 dual shaft 425 amps. Yep. The 5045 driver. Yeah, I think that's different than the stepper line kit that I recommend. Jerry Blakesley says, hey Dave, get off there. I'm actually hanging in your group.
Blakesley's in the hangout. Well, stay there. I'll be on there later on tonight.
Yeah, I'd see you, Jerry.
I haven't seen him in years.
Yeah.
Well, months.
The UC400 is a 6-axis, if I remember right. I'm not sure. I think that's the difference between some of those. Like I said, you get more options with those.
Does anybody have any questions on the electronics part of it, specifically on hooking it up or anything like that Dave can answer?
Jerry takes for us about 6 months to open it. We like to give Russ a hard time.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess, I don't see any questions popping up. I did want to do one thing, though. I do have a few little props here, and I thought I would show something. Well, I may have to hold it up here where you can see it. But another thing you have to figure out because a lot of times when you get these kits, you either get very poor documentation or it's what I like to refer to as Chinglish. Where it doesn't make a lot of sense. But, and there's lots of videos out there, I think, that show this, but I'll show it since we're doing this show. A lot of times you'll get a stepper motor that comes just like this. You got 4 colored wires coming out of here, but none of them are labeled. And when you connect it to your driver right here, I don't know if I can hold that close enough where y'all can see that or not. You have A+, A-, and then B+ and B-.
Yep.
So these 4 wires have to go to those connections, but you can't just go willy-nilly and stick one, you might get lucky, but you probably won't. I would, if the way my luck is. So anyway, you have to figure out which of these are pairs. You're going to have an A and a B pair. So an easy way to do that is with the wires not connected to anything. You can, this one's a little more difficult because there's not a flat spot on the shaft, but you can grab that shaft and you can turn it and feel the motor turning inside there. Well, to tell which wires are supposed to be a pair, if you take 2 of them, and I already know which ones these are, so I'm going to purposely take ones that aren't. So if you I'm taking the red and the black and I'm holding them together, but when I turn this, it still turns freely. So I know that those 2 are not a pair. Right. So now I'm going to go to, again, I already know this, but I'm going to take the green and the black. I'm going to touch those 2 together. I can do all this while holding this up here where you can see it. And now you can, if you really try, you can turn it, but it's locking this up. And the same thing would happen if I take the red and the blue. So when you connect 2 wires and that's what locks the motor up, you now know that this can be either the A+ and A-, or it can be the B+ and B-, and then this one would be the other one. So the red and the blue would be one pair, the green and the black would be another. And again, mine just happened, this particular motor happens to have red, blue, green, and black. Yours might have, a different color. It might want, instead of blue, it might have a white wire or something. But same thing. You got to figure out which 2 touch together to lock this up, and then know that that's either going to be your A or your B. one or the other. So
Rob has a question. What's the advantage of using 2 power supplies versus one larger one? Well, there's a couple reasons to use 2. Sometimes there's actually 2 different voltages involved. And another one is just to distribute the amperage. Those are 2 of reasons. Landis, any come up with another reason for using 2 or 1?
Yeah, well, the big reason is stepper motors pull max current to hold it in position. So
Right.
It's always pulling that max current. So if you only had 1 power supply, that would be a pretty big, hefty current draw on 4 motors. So they separate them so that you're at hold. Now that's when it's set in steel, it's pulling max current. So you got enough current to do the job.
Yeah, that's right. To balance them out, to basically balance the power out a little better, rather than that. Yeah. And Jerry Coleman, mine came with 3 power supplies, so each axis gets one. That's a lot of power.
yeah, another thing I wanted to mention, for example, this, like I said, this is the kit that I recommend because I've dealt with these folks, and I know a lot of other folks that have bought this exact kit and have had good luck with it. But another thing, if you get a kit that has 2 power supplies, and there's no rule or law that says you have to do this. I'm just telling you this because it just makes common sense to me. When you hook 2 stepper motors up to 1 power supply, hook your X and your Z up to one, and your Y and your A up to the other one. Now, if you want to know why you would do that, think about it for a second. Your Y and your A axis are slaved, and that's what moves your Y axis. They both have to move together. All right. Well, if you have the A, or let's say you have the A on 1 power supply and the Y on the other power supply, and all of a sudden you have a problem with one of those power supplies, guess what? It's going to rack like crazy. So if it's going to go bad, have it stop both of them. So if you're going to do 2 motors on one and 2 motors on the other, have your Y and your A on one of them, and have your X and your Z on the other one.
And also for another reason, which really isn't a valid reason, but the power curve. If you have both the Y's on 1 power supply, it's going to be it's going to when both of them are running, it's going to pull twice the power, but they'll be even at the same time, rather than you're going to be randomly X and the Z are going to be randomly using power while the other 2 are steady. How can I explain it other than you don't want that type of power fluctuations affecting you want them to be slaved together in every way, including the power supply.
Yeah. Ernest says his kit came with 2 power supplies, 350 watt 36 volt. Can I use 148 power supply instead of the 36? You could, but if it comes with both power supplies, you might as well use them. There are some kits that have a real beefy power supply, and it just comes with 1. I kind of like having the 2, just for the reasons Hobby just mentioned. You put 2 motors on one, you kind of spread it out. And power supplies, if you go to buy a power supply, in fact, I've got the link to power supply. No, I don't. Maybe I didn't. I forgot. I might have forgot to put the link to the power supply. But if you go look up a power supply, they're pretty cheap. I mean, they're not going to break the budget too much. So. Jerry says his came with 3 power supplies, so each axis gets 1. 1,600 ounces of 6 ounce. Yeah, that's some hefty stuff there.
David, one other thing too, a bigger power supply puts out a lot more heat. That's going to heat. If you put it in a cabinet, that's really going to heat up your cabinet. 2
Right.
power supplies have their own little fans, so keeping that heat down. That's a big plus when it comes to your cabinets.
Yeah. I've got a power supply right here, and most of the time they'll have this little sticker on here, but just in case you hook this up and you go, wow, my stupid fan's not running. It's because it's got a circuit in there, so it's not that when you first turn it on, that fan won't come on. It's to come on when it gets hot enough to pull that heat out of it. So if you turn this on and then hold your hand over and go, oh, it's not working, it's probably not warm enough yet. You give it a minute, it'll come on later. I guarantee you. So, all right. Any other questions? Rob said he had the same question. I'm not sure. Was it the same question?
Yeah, that was the one we answered. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
1 versus 2.
Okay.
Steps per revolution on your Gatton.
Steps per revolution on the Gatton. Well, assuming you're using everything I spec out, you're using the 5-start lead screw. The stepper motors are going to have, 200, I think that's what they call it, 200 steps per revolution, and then you have to do all the math. But anyway, it comes out to approximately 6,400. That's the number I always tell everybody to put in their steps per unit in Mach 3 or UC, CNC, if that's what they're using. But, when you run your little test part, as you should, when you first get ready, don't throw that big chunk of mahogany on there to run that 3D project. You should run your test parts first when you first get your machine turned on. You can then take calipers and dial it in further. I've got videos out that show how to do that. So then your number, instead of, once and I'm not going to go into how to calibrate the axis because that's all in Mach 3, and we've talked about that in other shows. I'll do that again in another show if somebody wants to know. But, your number may end up being 63, 97 point, and then a big long string of numbers, versus the 6,400. But if you put the 6,400 in there, start off as a base to start with, that'll get you, if you built your machine and all the stars are aligned, it should be pretty close. You'd probably be within 10,000 without even changing it off at 6,400.
You got a question there about wiring A, and are there any other documents that'll show you how to tell the A plus, A minus, B plus, B minus?
Well, are you talking about on the motor?
Yes, he's talking about on the motor.
If you buy a kit or you buy a stepper motor and it comes with really good documentation, it might say that the black and the green are one pair and the red and the blue are the other pair. But like I said, all this stuff comes from overseas, comes from China. So I found that on a lot of these kits, the documentation is pretty lacking. So it takes like a couple minutes. You see how long it took me to just hold a couple of wires together, try to turn it. If it doesn't turn, you know that's a pair. And then obviously the other two that you're not touching are the other pair.
Yeah.
Ernest said you set your drivers to 1/16. Yes, that's how I run mine at 1/16. The early Xylotex kits way back in the day used to be set for 1/8 step, and that's where I got all screwed up, or I didn't really, but everybody else did, because when I did the how to build a router, CNC router on a shoestring budget videos. When I bought my Xylotex kit, plug and play kit, and remember, we're talking back then, they were using the 269 ounce steppers. Anyway, when I bought the kit for that machine that I was building for that video series, I got one that was 1/8 step because they'd always been 1/8 step. Right after I shot that video, or shortly after, Jeff started doing them set to 1/16. And everybody would get them and go, man, these numbers you're posting as the settings, they're not right. And then I went and looked on Jeff's website, and that's what it was. He had started having, they were set to, 1/16. So the old number used to be 3,200 steps per unit back when it was 1/8 step, because that's what worked with the 5-start lead screws. But now it's the same 5-start lead screw, but if you run it at 1/16 step, that base number will be 6,400, which be twice as much as twice as big.
I wanted to touch upon Roger's question real quick. I wanted to add something. As you mentioned, black and green, just as a simple cheat sheet, black and green are usually almost always, I've never had an instance to see otherwise, in a stepper motor go together are one pair, and red and blue are the other pair. Doesn't matter whether you put them on the pair on A or the pair on B, or vice versa. And negative and positive, don't worry about that as well, because that'll. But the bottom line is that's kind of an easy way to do it. 99% of the time, unless again some Chinglish manufacturer wired them up really bad, really poorly.
Yeah, I wanted to let me see.
There are other colors, but those are the 4 I've seen on every stepper motor I've ever come across.
I should have had a picture. I've got a link to it, but I didn't save the picture for some reason. But I wanted to show you guys something else that I highly recommend, and I'm going to try to find one that's fairly cheap here. I think this is the one that I have the link for. Let me come back over to here. But this right here is a excellent investment. You can see this is like $14.
Yep.
It's AC. So, I have one of these set up, not this one exactly, but one very similar to this, a 5-inch fan. And it's plugged in to where when I flip the switch to turn on my controller, this automatically comes on. Now, the controller that I have also has 4 of those I think it has 3 of those little bitty fans, and they're right next to the drivers. And I have this thing pointing and blowing across those drivers. And this is what I was talking about, how whenever I'm running my Gatton CNC, I walk around there every once in a while just to see if I can catch those little bitty fans running. And I've never been able to catch them on. They never come on because this thing keeps those drivers cool. So, I'm not trying to be a salesman for these kind of fans, but as you can see, this was $14. So it's some really, and it'll put out a whole lot more air than those other little fans. And I highly recommend getting one of these to put, especially if you're building an enclosure or something. It's something that's got some size to it to move a bunch of air around.
Yep, you can never be cool enough when it comes to those boxes. They were talking about, Harry was suggesting that to use an LED, which is another way around it. If you hit a pair, it'll light the LED as you turn it. Basically, what for those of you that know nothing about electronics or a little bit, when you're turning the motor, when you put power to 2 wires, it will make an electromagnet in the right spot, turn the motor just a step. Now, if you turn the motor, the reverse effect happens. So you're putting power to those 2 wires ever so slightly, which will turn on an LED. And in Dave's case, when he says short 2 wires out, what's happening is you're turning it, it's producing power, it's shorting itself and causing resistance back into the motor. So it'll be hard to turn if you got the right 2, if you got a pair shorted together. Just one pair, don't short both of them.
Yeah, Rob added to what I was doing a while ago, and I want to bring this up again. You know, when I touch those and I find out that the black and green are a pair and the red and blue are a pair, I could call the green and black A and the red and blue B, or I could vice versa. It doesn't matter which.
Right.
And it also doesn't matter which one you call the plus or the minus. It's you got to keep that pair of wires together. You know, that's the main thing. But other than that, it doesn't matter.
And it doesn't matter whether it's positive negative or negative positive. It makes no difference. You just got to make sure the pairs are correct, because one pair goes to one set of motors on one set of coils on this, and the other pair attaches to the other set, and so they're kind of one and the other. Not to get too technical, but it'll work when you got a pair and the other pair. Any direction, as long as they're each together.
Ernest is asking about Hall effect limit switches. I have not used them. Well, on some of my machines, I have the switches on there and I just disable them because a lot of times I don't even bother using them. But on the ones where I use them as a homing switch, I just have the cheap little mechanical switches that are, you know, you buy a pack of them for about $10 or something. I think you get like 6 for $10 or something. It's ridiculous how cheap some of that stuff is. Although they may be going up now that we got tariffs going on. But anyhow, no, I don't know of anybody that uses. I know some people, and I'm not exactly sure what a Hall effect limit switch is. I know some people are using what I call a proximity switch. I don't know exactly what that was. Let's see, my electronics. Here's something different. He mounted a bathroom exhaust fan. There you go. That ought to move some air. Oh, it's electronics. Yeah, in a kit. All right.
Yeah, I mean, you could use. You could use just about anything for a limit switch, from a Mercury switch to a. I'm with Dave. I stick to the simple, the little micro lever limit switches. I use them, the micro lever switches as limit switches, because as long as you bolt it on and you set it and you calibrate it and set it to the right distance, it's not really going to change.
Okay, yeah, everybody's saying that the Hall effect are magnetic. So
yeah, you put a magnet on one side and then the other side's a limit switch.
okay,
I mean, it's just a switch. Yeah, like you use would use on door sensors for alarms. Like you drill a hole in the door, you put the magnet in there, and then in the frame of the door you wire the switch, the sensor.
Yeah, Rob says he did a video for magnetic switches a while back. It was for Linux CNC, but should work the same for all systems. So go check out Rob Schuster's YouTube channel. Check that out. And also, if you missed last week's show, check out his amazing custom rotary CNC drum machine.
Drum machine, yep.
It is awesome. It is awesome.
Yep.
All right. Anybody got any other questions? We've already been on here over an hour, so I guess we'll go ahead and get ready to cut out of here. Yes, it is. Todd says that thing is awesome. It is indeed awesome. one of the coolest things I've seen in a long, long time. You see when you watch YouTube videos, you see a lot of, you see a lot of crazy stuff. People that, guys that make stuff and, with gears and drill motors and, all kinds of different things. But a lot of times it's just silly stuff. It's not something that's actually used for something. That's what I liked about Rob's is he wanted to make drums. So he builds a machine to make drums. That's pretty cool. I really like that.
And very well designed. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, it was a great piece of engineering in my book. I'm all about that kind of stuff. And what's really more impressive too is that he did it, drawing all that stuff in what do you say, VCarve Pro, I think, and just 2D stuff. So he didn't even have a 3D modeling software where he could, put an assembly together and test, if there's interference and stuff like that. That's even more impressive that he had to do it, using the 2D software. So, Ryan Ballard says he's sorry, missed most of the show. Was driving to the beach. Well, there's always reruns, Brian. Yeah. Gary Coleman says thanks, Dave. Another great show. Good night, all. We thank you all for watching.
Randy Hall's having a problem cutting a good circle. The age-old problem.
Well, yep, that old.
It's start. Two suggestions. Number one, start by calibrating, and Dave will expand on this. Calibrating your X and calibrating your Y separately, because if one is not calibrated, you're going to get an oval every time. And second, check the structural rigidity of your gantry and everything else, because if your router is bending in one direction or the other, then it doesn't have enough support, then again that'll cause a bad circle.
Yeah, if it's somebody who's, and I don't know where you're at, Randy, if you're just now, are we talking about just getting your machine going and it's doing the circle on your test piece, or, you've already been running a while, there's a couple of things too that I might mention. Me, I always go back to that, check the simple things first. If you have a coupler that's at least bent loose and could maybe just be slipping just a hair, that could make your circle out of whack, as well as, just depending on when it slips, it could make a lot of things out of whack. Always make sure all that mechanical stuff sound first. Like Javi said, it could be, if you're trying to plunge too fast or something, you may be getting a tilt on your, your router as it comes down. Another thing, if you're trying to cut, a little bit too fast, you need to have your constant velocity set correctly, because that might throw it out of whack, especially if you're doing something where you're going around a corner.
Yeah, like Dave said, check the coupler, because he's mentioned in one of the in his video he has a very good video where you actually can put a ruler and adjust the steps per inch, just calibrate it. If your coupler is loose, you could actually run that test and it'll be fine, because in one direction it'll expand, but in the other it'll go back to normal, and you will never know it. But in drawing a circle, you'll see it.
Yeah, and another thing too, when you're building your machine, and I'm guilty because I don't do this, but don't do as I do as I say. Take some of this stuff, buy you a little bottle of white out, or this is called liquid paper.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And put little witness marks on the coupler, and really on the stepper motor, you don't really have to worry. I mean, you probably can go ahead and put one on the lead screw too, but 9 times out of 10, that's not going to be where it slips. It's going to be slipping on this slippery shaft or smooth shaft of the stepper if you don't get it snug enough. So just use a little whiteout, put a witness mark. That way you can walk over there and at a quick glance go, marks aren't lining up, so it must have slipped. And then you know you need to tighten it back up.
Randy, are they here's another question, because I've thought of another possibility. You said they're small circles. Are they turning into ovals, or is there a possibility that you've done a bitmap trace of a circle and the Vectric software is not actually making a true circle but a bunch of lines, and it might make a jagged circle? Because you never really said specifically how is the circle bad? Just curious.
Todd's saying your bit is out of round.
Yeah.
I can tell you, if you put a bit in there that's the least bit bent, you know as soon as that dude's freaked up, hang of a noise. Oh man, bring you out of there. All right, Steve Atkins, e-stops. Do I need one? What do I need? There again, you go to, of course, I just assume everybody's an Amazon shopper like I am, because most people are. Go to Amazon and you can find a cheap one for, I don't know, probably surely less than $20, I would think. I don't know. But I don't know. I think the jury's out as far as my opinion on whether you need one. I have one, and I used to have one wired up on one of my machines, but my Gatton machine, that's the one I run probably more than any of the others. And I don't have one. And it's kind of like, this is kind of my thoughts on it. You guys can chime in and let me know your 2 cents worth. But if you're standing there, even if you're standing there right at the machine watching it,
yep,
when it starts messing up, it don't matter whether you're hitting an e-stop or you reach over and click the mouse or whatever, it's already messed up most of the time. Unless you notice that it's doing something wrong while it's up in the air and it's moving to a different spot. But most of the time when when something messes up, it's messed up, and you're not going to get it quick enough no matter what you do. So if an e-stop makes you feel better, get one.
Yeah.
They're easy to wire up. I've got down again, if you're watching, let's see. Yeah, he's on YouTube. So if you look on the links that I got a whole bunch of links for different stuff, but also I have links to the 2 videos for the shows that I did a while back. One is how to wire your hobby CNC, and it goes through how to do the drivers, the stepper motors, power supplies, all that stuff. And then the following week, we did one on how to add limit switches, an e-stop, and a touch plate, I think. So, I mean, there's only 2 wires. So they're easy
I gotta agree with Rob Schuster. I either hit my escape key real quick, because that's what my habit is, or I always have my controller. I've got one of these Xbox controllers that I use to move the machine. I always have that next to me when I'm running an unknown job, and my thumb is like 1 twitch away from the e-stop. Not enough to make a mistake and hit it accidentally, but enough that it's fast enough. It's still, you're never fast enough, like you said, Dave. But
yeah, I don't know of anybody that's fast enough really to.
By the way,
there's rare occasions where you might, depending on what it's doing, you might get it. But most of the time, when it's actually cutting, and all of a sudden something goes haywire, it's too late. I mean, there's no matter how fast you are.
It's going to take it to the table. Yeah.
What I used to do back in the day, I don't do it much anymore, but I've got touch screens now. But before I had touch screens and I was using the mouse to move around and hit cycle start and all that, what I would do is I'd hit cycle start, and then I would take the mouse and I'd put the arrow right over the either the stop or the reset button, and that way all I had to do was hit the mouse. So that was in effect my e-stop button. But again, it never really matters because it's probably already messed up the workpiece anyway by the time you catch it. So
Randy said his circle problem were ovals. What I would suggest, Randy, is you said they were 1.5 inches. I would put a caliper on it, assuming your bit and all your programming is correct. Find out, measure along the X, and then measure along the Y. If one of them is exactly 1.5 inches and then the other one's 1.7 inches or something like that, at least you've narrowed down which side you need to calibrate, and and check the bend of the Z box or the gantry. See if it has any type of play. Run it slower. If that solves the problem, well then maybe you're forcing it too much. And if not, it's just a simple calibration issue. Steps per inch.
Jerry says he has an e-stop in the electronics bucket never installed. Yeah, I've got, in fact.
Yeah, there you go. Ryan made a good suggestion. Cut it square and see what you get.
That's all tangled left here, but here's
there's another e-stop
that I had. See, I brought it in here to when I was doing that video, several months ago now. I never have taken it back out there and wired it back up. So this is, these are reasonably cheap, and this is probably a little nicer than those little teeny tiny ones you get. But as you can see, it's just 2 wires, easy to wire up. So if you want wire, like I said, if it makes you feel. Now some people will say that they'll get. I've seen guys they'll get like 4 or 5 of these and wire them up all around the machine and stuff. And
then you bump the machine accidentally and you ruin hours of work.
Yeah, I guess that could happen. But like I said, most of the time, no matter how fast you are, your workpiece is shot anyway. So
Murray says he's having a problem with his x-axis is stuttering. Murray, do you mean that the motor itself is like if it's a loose connection not working correctly, or is it locking up because perhaps maybe the lead screw is not perfectly straight, or is a little bit is it locking up, or is it
No, it's stuttering, and you're running too fast at a low RPM.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go way off in another direction here, as I often do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say you need to check your connections, because I don't know if you're one of those that are still running those Molex connectors.
Oh yeah.
Things get dust in them and stuff. They'll start making it.
Yep.
Stutter. It'll just.
I've gotten rid of all the connectors. I've soldered all my connections directly.
Make sure if you're using a parallel cable, make sure it's pushed on there good. They can, sometimes they'll get loose and everything else will work, and you'll have one little thing that don't work, and that's all it is that one pin isn't quite making contact, or maybe it's got dusty or something like that. So,
and one other thing you might try is check. Make sure your settings are the same as on Dave's site, as far as the hertz, how many your port settings. I forgot which page that was, Dave, but the speed, and the hertz, because I can actually push my Gatton to 800 inches per minute, but it will actually go that fast 1 out of every 5 tries, because it'll either rack up or stutter, or because I'm pushing it where it's not meant to be to go. By check, just because I wanted to see if I could do it. But check the connection. The other thing, and again, I'm just throwing this all out there. If it is something electronic, not sending the proper signals, and all your wires are properly connected, then it may be an issue with your computer speed or some of the resources on your computer, because I've had that happen to me before as well. Whereas I've had 2 or 3 different things connected to my computer, whether it's a camera or a mouse, or the computer was too slow, and all it takes is the resource to just pay attention to something other than the CNC, and then it'll lose steps. And if make sure you have the computer dedicated to the CNC, adequate enough, and one more thing: never run a file. Although some people have had good luck with it, and some people say they've never had issues. Never run a file off an SD card. Always run it off your internal drive, because that also causes problems if there's a delay in the reading of the card, and that has happened to me as well. Shielded cables, another possibility, as Todd put.
Murray said he removed the coupler from the motor, and it's doing it with nothing connected. So it might be a connection issue with your wiring, man.
Yep.
That would be my bad.
Yeah, it could be any of the things I've mentioned. It could be connection. It could be a number of things. Now, if it happens, well, it could be any. It could be any one of them. It could also be a bad stepper motor, or a bad stepper driver. Try. Well, step 1, troubleshooting. Swap 2 of the cables. Swap one stepper motor with another, and see if
he did that. He did that.
He did that. And what happened?
It went to the other axis.
Cable.
Yeah, then it's a connection issue.
Yeah.
If the problem moves when you
It did. Okay, so it moved to the other axis, which basically means the stepper driver of the stepper driver might be bad.
It could be. What
It could be a controller issue.
What kind of setup is he running? As he said,
I couldn't see it, but
traded Z and X, and it's doing with the Z. It didn't move at all. It does it with the lead screws disconnected and the motor's just running on its own. Wow, that really sounds like a controller or a stepper driver issue.
yeah. Well, like I said, easiest things first. Check your connections, turn the power off, pull them out, blow your parallel cable off, make sure it's pushed in there good. You got to do the easy stuff first, folks. I mean, we could sit here and guess all night, well, it could be this or it could be that, and it might be. But you got to do the easy stuff first. It might be something as simple as your parallel cable's going bad.
Wait.
It may not be pushed in all the way, that kind of thing.
Yeah, if it remains on the X, no matter what cable is connected to it, then it's the motor. Then the motor's bad. It looks like you got a bad motor. They're about $22.
Well, I thought he said he swapped it and the problem moved to the other axis.
That's the part I'm unsure about, because he says it remains on X no matter which cable is connected to it. So it's possible, Murray, that it could be the X motor connector. Absolutely possible. Oh, it didn't move, he says. Okay. So it is the X. So it's definitely, you've narrowed it down to the X motor. So it's either the motor is messed up or the connection to the motor. I would say try, some wire nuts, cut the connection off, put some wire nuts and run it directly, and see if that works.
Yeah. Well, the reason, and again, I would highlight out that there's a problem with the stepper motor simply because those things pretty much last forever.
Yeah.
I've never had one. I've had drivers go bad and got bad drivers from different companies, but I've never had a stepper motor that did. So I really doubt the issue. I would think it's more a connection issue.
I would agree.
Try that first because that's simply the easiest thing to check.
Absolutely.
Or blow out or whatever you're going to do. And then, if you still have an issue, you can swap things. And if it's a bad driver, then the new axis should be screwing up. And if it's not screwing up, then I just can't believe
I've had issues on the Gatton that I built. One of the issues that I had, and it was my own fault because I didn't run them all through. I just let all the wires hang until I had the drive chain set up, and I had the connector go bad. First thing I did, once it only had to happen once to me, I cut all those connectors off and I wired them all directly, soldered them nice, and taped them all up. I mean, never had an issue since. The only other thing it could be is the actual wires frayed inside the motor or a bad motor, which is a very rare occasion. And that's another thing, Murray. Do you have a lot of tension on those wires? Because if you do, then it's possible that they've just frayed and are making bad contact inside the motor.
Yeah, there's, it's troubleshooting is hard for everybody else to do when you're right there at the machine. When you're right there at it, you're seeing exactly what it's doing. But and I don't mean to sound condescending or anything, but you have to just kind of stop for a minute and go, all right, let's just use some common sense here. It worked fine yesterday. I come out here today and it's not working. What changed?
Right.
If nothing changed, it again.
You gotta process
first. Check the coupler to make sure it's not slipping. You check your connections because the dog might have walked through and bumped one, and anything can happen. But that's the easiest stuff to check first. And so many times I see people dive into Mach 3 settings and chasing their tail, and then it ends up being something stupid, like I just mentioned.
And then they end up compounding the problem because now they've changed the settings.
Yeah.
And now it's not going to work even if you fix it. Yeah, it's tough. And all this Dave is got to be one of the best troubleshooters around because he, like myself, have had all those issues happen to us. Once it happens to you once, you learn.
That's how I've learned so much is because I've had stuff. Those Molex connectors, although they're really super handy as far as plug and play, you just pop them in and all that. They suck for everything else because they get dust down in them. I don't know if y'all remember probably about a year ago now, I showed on Facebook. I posted a picture where I had to cut one off, and it was brown and practically melted the plastic. It got so much dust in there that it just shorted out. And
I can't stand it. I had a Molex connector on an air handler in my house, and I spent 3 hours troubleshooting that thing, and it turned out to be on the blower motor of the air handler. That's all it was. It was just a bad, poor connection. And I did to that the same thing I did to these CNCs is I cut off the connectors and solder them. I mean, why do you need them? How often are you going to be swapping out your motors, really.
Yeah, and I would even tell people if you don't know how to solder wires together or you don't want to solder wires together, cut them damn connectors off anyway and wrap some electrical tape around them or something. Anything is, as long as you get them wrapped up good and keep the dust out, that's better than that stupid mullets connector.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Radio
those
Shack.
are really handy because they're simple and they plug. And another thing too is you have to watch out for is sometimes, and I'm mainly talking about some of the Xylotech stuff I've had, those little pins inside that connector. Sometimes if one of those gets pushed back, you plug it up, but the two contacts aren't touching. So that's why I say cut those things off, solder them together, or use butt joint connectors or something. Anything's better than this.
Radio Shack used to sell these, what they call it, match solder. I used to love those they were little tiny strips of tin that you'd actually bend over the wire and you light a match or a lighter underneath it, and that would solder it. Those wires, boy, that was back in the day. What's his face? Let's see here. Ernest was asking how we feel about aircraft connectors. The good thing about aircraft connectors is, well, they're decent connectors. Now, if you're in a high humidity, I don't care what kind of connectors you use, nothing is better than wiring the wire directly, because if you're in high humidity, you're going to get corrosion. But the problem with those aircraft connectors, and I know Dave has gone through this because we've talked, is they're a pain in the butt to solder. You got to solder these things. Look, that Kevin just mentioned it. The GX connectors you have to solder. That's the problem with those GX connectors, is that if you don't know how to solder, that's a worse option for you, because you got to be really good at it. And then you got the other issue of hopefully you've got the right spatial perception, because you solder them this way, you turn them upside down and they're inverted, and you got the A and B mixed up, and you just, now you've got a whole other issue.
Yeah, like I said, I'd be interested to hear what it is, but what exactly it sounds like to me is that one of those four wires is not touching good enough.
Yeah.
I know, because that's what mine was doing when I checked that Molex connector and found out it was all brown and about to burn up. It was doing that little stuttering thing. So Dennis Nolan says, I built a 24 by 24 control box, little fan on each side, blowing in and out. Will it get too hot with a plexiglass cover? Want to keep the dust out. You'll probably be okay. Just, even with it, with the cover and all that, I can tell you dust is still going to get in there. So periodically check it and blow it out, and you'll be fine probably. I always try to set the fans where, if you got when you say a little fan, I don't know what you're talking about, but if you got enough airflow and you got one blowing in and the other one pulling out, you'll probably get enough ventilation across there to keep those drivers cool. But I always try to keep my fans where they're going to hit, they're like, the drivers aren't lined up here and the fans over here going this way. I have it where it's blowing or pulling right across those fans. All right, not the fans, the drivers, because that's what you got to keep cool.
Yep.
Let's see. We're running right on here, going on a marathon session here. Let's see if we got any more questions.
Cheat code, One Designs. Yeah, absolutely. Just
Opens in the house.
Yeah. Just twist and shrink and put shrink tubing on it.
Yeah. Instead of a soldering gun, you just need a hairdryer. There you go.
That's the way to do it.
Good solution. Yeah, the aircraft connectors are really slick, but they're a pain in the butt.
Yeah, especially since
especially
most
for old guys, because you can't see, and all that. It's such a small spot to.
Yeah, and it's not a copper to copper connection either, so which makes it even harder.
Yeah, maybe put some cloth over the input side to filter the air in. Yeah, that helps out. Reminds me of my
T-shirt.
my old T-shirt that I used to have on top of my Porter cable router. I used to take a lot of flack for that, but
Yeah, we used to joke around that it was your underwear.
it saved a lot of crap from going through that router. And it was a T-shirt. It wasn't underwear. But all right. Well, I think Mary Cohen says, I think you're right, Dave. I've been known to be right once in a while. All right, we're going to wrap this one up. We've been on here an hour and 46 minutes. Still got almost 60 people over there watching on Facebook, or I mean YouTube. I don't know how many we got watching on Facebook. Yeah, just 2 or 3 over there. Anyhow, thank y'all for tuning in. Like I said, if anybody has got questions on some of this stuff about the electronics, I put links in the show description of those videos where I show how to wire everything up, and also the next episode after that shows how to add homing switches, limit switches, touch plate, and an e-stop if you want to do that. But anyhow, and in the meantime, I will try to put together a good wiring diagram. But again, no matter what kind of wiring diagram I come up with, there's so many different components that people use that'll only work really for people that use very similar stuff to what I use. But I'm somebody had on there a while ago, keep it simple, stupid, or whatever. That's the KISS theory that I've always used is, try to keep things simple, and that way you don't have to fight with a lot of problems. So anyway, all right. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Javi, for hanging here with me. Jim, always good to see you. Landis, thank you for coming on tonight. And I'm so happy to hear that your 2 machines are still performing well.
I have to say I love the Gatton better, though. I love it better than the Garage Works. I like the Garage Works, but that Gatton still, you can't beat it.
Yeah, it's well, I've been saying for a while now, if I had to get rid of all my machines and only keep one, I would definitely keep that one for sure, because it's just it's a workhorse. So anyway, we're going to get out of here. Landis, you don't have to leave. We can hang around. We'll chat after the show here. But thanks everybody for tuning in tonight, and we will see you next week.
Same bat time, same bat channel.